We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180. Our guest by phone is the president of the Pacific Research Institute, the author of The Truth About Obamacare, and a great new book, The Pipes Plan, Sally Pipes. Sally, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Hey, Sally, the Pipes Plan, 10 ways to defeat Obamacare, but hopefully we have 9 people that will defeat it.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's just so very important when you look at all the things that are coming out. You know, the Supreme Court decision, which we expect around late June, around June 30th. We just discovered there was a slush fund of $1 billion, which to hire more IRS people to skulk around and make sure that people have health insurance. There's all kinds of things. It is just so important that we have the Affordable Care Act repealed and replaced early in 2013.
So, Sally, you're the expert on health care, and you're the president of Pacific Research Foundation. Tell us what's on your itinerary this coming week or next 2 weeks.
Well, it's a very busy itinerary because, I write a biweekly column for Forbes.com, so I'm just finishing that up on Paul Ryan's Medicare plan, which, of course, people like Nancy Pelosi say that if we introduce something like that, seniors will be dying in the streets. Of course, seniors will be dying in the streets if we don't do something about Medicare financing, because as the Congressional Budget Office has said, it will be bankrupt by 2022, when the cost will have doubled to $1 trillion from roughly the $500 billion it costs today. So that's very, very frightening. Then, of course, I'm continuing to write other op-eds. I'm on my way to Santa Barbara tonight to give a speech there tomorrow. And then on Sunday, I go to Washington, D.C. for a whole group of appointments with members of Congress, senators, and people who are in the healthcare field. And then the following Sunday, I go to New York to give a speech there, and also a speech down in Torrance as well on my way back on the Thursday evening. So it's very busy. There's no rest for the weary, as we say in the healthcare debate.
Something you had mentioned, Sally, earlier, you said something about $1 billion slush fund for the new IRS agents?
Yes, that just came out this week, and it was something that was tucked into the Affordable Care Act, and it was just revealed on Monday. And so, this is to hire about 200 new IRS agents to make sure people have their health insurance on their tax return, and to hire an additional 300 IRS agents to go around and seek out people who, are people with disabilities, to make sure that they're taking the most advantage of the opportunities given them under the Affordable Care Act. So, it's a lot of it's a lot of money. That's there's just so many things that keep coming up in the Affordable Care Act that we had no idea. The bill, which became the law just over 2 years ago, on March 23rd, 2010, it was signed by the president. It's 2,700 pages, but there are already about just over 12,000 pages of rules and regulations in the Federal Register already. I mean, this is just an unbelievable bureaucratic nightmare. And just also this week, Charles Blayhouse at Mercatus Center released a paper showing that the Affordable Care Act between 2012 and 2021 is going to add $340 billion to the deficit, maybe as much as $527 billion. So this goes completely contrary to what the president said over and over again, that his health care law will not add 1 cent to the deficit of this country. So all kinds of things are coming out that I'm really hoping the American public, wake up and smell the coffee and realize this is not going to lead to universal coverage. It's not going to bend the cost curve down. And even for those people who have employer-based coverage, they are going to see their health care plans changed and the cost go up.
I tend to disagree with you on one issue. I believe that over time, this will lead to universal coverage if it isn't overturned by the Supreme Court. That's my opinion. Now, one other thing I wanted to mention, and in regard to the Ryan plan,
yes,
I want to quote one of our famous legislators. We need to pass it so we can find out what's in it.
Nancy Pelosi, yes. And, she said that 11 days before the passage of the bill. And, she's been making these just scurrilous statements. She has predicted already that the Supreme Court will rule 6-3 in favor of the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act and the individual mandate. She also said that if the Affordable Care Act was passed, 4 million jobs would be created, and about 400,000 almost immediately. And then, of course, her famous statement about seniors on Medicare will die in the streets if we, do anything to do voucherizing, raising the age of eligibility, and means testing. So she, for someone who is from, a family with a lot of money, she has really excelled herself in some of these statements.
Mm-hmm. We're having a conversation with the president of Pacific Research Institute, the author of The Truth About Obamacare, Sally Pipes. Sally, do you think, I'm looking at the arguments, that Supreme Court arguments. I think it's going to come down 5-4 against Obamacare. Do you agree with that?
I think, the court had 3 days of hearings. It was really the highest number of days for the Supreme Court, in a long, long time. They devoted 3 days. They looked at a number of issues. They looked at the issue of the individual mandate and, does it violate the Commerce Clause? Is it constitutional? They also looked at the Anti-Injunction Act to see if the legislation contained the fact that the individual mandate was a tax, not a fine or a penalty. They may have said we're not going to proceed because if it's a tax, it won't be collected till 2014. We won't have any results till 2015. But even Justices Breyer and Ginsburg said there's no mention in the legislation that it is a tax. So that the case is definitely going forward. They also looked at the issue of does the federal government have the power to coerce states to expand their Medicaid programs for low-income Americans? Because as you know, the law, they expect to add 18 million people to Medicaid under Obamacare. And the final thing they looked at is the individual mandate, if it is severed from the entire law, can the law stand? So those are the 4 things that they were looking at. I was very pessimistic the week prior to March 26th, when the hearing started. I was pessimistic because I was worried about whether Justice Scalia would rule that that it was not a violation of the Commerce Clause, because he was the justice in the Gonzalez versus Raich case in 2005, the medical marijuana case where Angel Raich wanted to, with a doctor's prescription, grow marijuana in her backyard for her own personal use because of her health problems, and he ruled that that was commerce. But listening to Justice Scalia in the hearings, he did make the famous statement that, if the federal government has the power to force us to buy insurance in the private market, where does it end? Can they force us to eat broccoli? So I'm much more optimistic. I think Justice Kennedy definitely will be the swing vote, but he seemed, in his questioning, very, committed to the fact that this really is an expansion of power of the federal government, and he did ask Solicitor General Verrilli, he asked the question, can you create commerce in order to regulate it? So I'm feeling much more optimistic. You're right that it may be a 5-4 decision, but if those people listening to Nancy Pelosi, who knows what she knows, says 6-3 in the other way, it's going to be a disaster for us. But I'm hoping that the individual mandate is ruled unconstitutional, and also that the whole law is ruled unconstitutional, because it gives us so much more flexibility, assuming in 2012, later this year, that the Republicans take the presidency, keep the House, and take back the Senate. That gives us a lot more options in order to repeal and replace Obamacare.
Well, if this is approved and we are forced to eat broccoli, I'll guarantee you that former President Bush will get a waiver.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't mind broccoli, but if they put things like Brussels sprouts and cauliflower on, I would seek a waiver for those too.
One of the things I want to get into when we come back in a little while, and we're not going to touch on it in this section, but I want to get into the new taxes that supposedly we don't have any taxes, the new taxes and new fines that they're going to hit employers with, or even people. And this is why I think that the whole premise of this program is to move towards a socialized single-payer system.
Oh, absolutely, and that will be your universal coverage. But as in Canada, Madam Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin said, access to a waiting list is not access to health care. Canada has universal coverage, but you have long waiting lists in order to get care. So that's a very important point. But I think you're right, and I think the President's long-term vision really is for a single-payer Medicare for all system, such as exists in Canada. And while Great Britain and Canada are experiencing a lot of problems, cost overruns, long waiting lists, the President has this ideological vision that government can make decisions better for us than we can make for ourselves. And it's frightening. We will be moving ourselves to an entitlement society such as exists in Western Europe, and we're seeing the problems of Greece and Spain and Portugal and France right now.
Exactly. Let's pick up there when we come back in a moment, Sally, okay? We'll be back in a moment with Sally Pipes on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk, 1180.